Chapter 1. In our search for meaning in suffering, it can result in a stronger mind. The first stage of imprisonment manifests itself as shock upon admittance into prison. An inmate is met with a frightening feeling of a new, cruel reality. As was common with inmates at concentration camps, the newbies were forced to cope with the shock of being snatched from normalcy and cast into a hell-like experience. A new inmate will experience shock. His new and old realities are sharp contrasts, and his mind struggles to make sense of it. Shock gave way to apathy, a total disregard for any kind of emotion. Since the paramount desire of the prisoner was to protect himself, his inner self, apathy was essential to prevent him from bothering about anyone but himself. The author suggests that as the exterior hardens and dulls, there can be a complementary increase in the spirit's quality. While the inmates' bodies deteriorate, their minds and souls become stronger. A connection to the powers beyond the physical world gets heightened in this condition. This manifested as dreams, vivid dreams of a future free from their present imprisonment, or at least a cessation of their suffering. There was no need for trivial desires like sex or anything that didn't ensure the prisoner's survival. As such, there was a drastic dip in libido among the inmates. They didn't care for much except for politics and religion. However, religion stood out. As it would seem, one's spirit grows stronger as we search for meaning in our present physical situation. Those with a strong spirit were able to withstand even the worst physical torture. The author also cites that love was a key component in the will to survive. Suffering might be deathly, but love is as strong as death. In a really tough situation, simply knowing that you had someone you'd live for made it easier to make it through. In the face of trials and death, love keeps the mind alive. The memory of a loved one is enough incentive to keep it together. These memories didn't have to be of loved ones necessarily. They could be of easier times. An incarcerated man's mind will replay fond memories and keep him in a state of blissful reminiscence as a form of relief. The mind can also become more attuned to art, beauty, and nature, or even heighten the prisoner's sense of humor.
Chapter 2. There is no amount of suffering that we cannot overcome. The theory that man can survive anything was tested and proven in Nazi concentration camps, where people had to endure what can only be described as hell on earth. Although all went through the same ordeal, some survived to tell the story. Remember, one can survive anything by putting their mind to it, even a concentration camp. But in this dire reality, you start to notice that there is clarity of mind, and the littlest things can bring you profound joy. These seemingly simple things made it easier for the mind to process relief. Merely knowing that you might get 2 slices of bread instead of 1 made a world of difference to the inmates at Poland's death camps. Don't forget, finding little joy amid suffering is key to survival. It keeps us grateful. Regardless of their situation, people can change or stay steadfast in their original design. Most prisoners resorted to despicable survival methods and blamed it on their surroundings. But a person's right to choose who they are and who they want to be in the face of trouble can't be taken from them. As imprisoned individuals search for meaning in their situation, they must see it as an opportunity to obtain fulfillment and find a purpose, because life cannot be complete without suffering. In their desire to survive, they shouldn't lose humanity. Remember, the tactics we employ to survive must not be at the cost of our true nature. The most trying part of the imprisonment for Viktor Frankl was when he didn't know for how long he'd be locked up. This unknown usually caused many people in concentration camps to give up and simply waste away, because they couldn't imagine a future beyond their lives behind barbed wire fences. Suffering loses its effect once you understand it and can make sense of it. Once you do, you free up space for faith in the future and strengthen your spiritual and mental truths. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Viktor Frankl.
Chapter 3. Humans search for a meaning all the time, longing for something other than the reality we are born into. Man, as a creature, cannot live a life without meaning. It's a primary motivation, a form of instinctive longing for something beyond this form of reality that controls this one. It is argued that meaning is an arbitrary concept conjured in the form of a defense mechanism, but the author believes that it goes beyond rationale and into a deeper conviction. One can live or die for their ideals, values, and a meaning. Owing to our biological design, we cannot simply exist. We require a meaning, a reason for the random chaos that we have to play a part in daily. Men can be faced with frustration whilst trying to exercise his right to define his own meaning. This conflict, which the author has named existential frustration, occurs when there is a great difficulty encountered as he strives to exist, find meaning for his existence, and find the will to define a meaning for his life. This results in neurogenic neurosis. Nous is Greek for the mind, which refers to the mind's great distress as it tries and fails to find meaning in its current engagement or situation. Sometimes, as we try to find a meaning for our lives, it can do more harm than good, causing inner tension even, but this conflict is needed for a man to survive just about anything effectively. The feeling of discontent with what one has accomplished and the desire to improve upon it makes for a better mental health state. This is his will to meaning. The tension that keeps one searching for a new meaning is dubbed neurodynamics and is applicable for both neurotic and normal people. We will only continue to live in mediocrity if we live a tensionless life. The tension of existential frustration acts as a catalyst for change. However, people suffer from a constant feeling of meaninglessness, termed the existential vacuum. This vacuum is the cause of the growing boredom in today's generation. The emptiness of a meaningless existence will leave a deep feeling of boredom that causes a lot of mental distress. Some of these include aggression, depression, and addiction, which often culminate in suicide. This is the place of logotherapy, psychoanalytic treatment that employs a search for logos, or meaning. It can fill the vacuum up with a concrete meaning and prevent a relapse into destructive habits. Did you know? Jewish people were excluded from public life on September 15, 1935, when the Nuremberg laws were issued. These laws also stripped German Jews of their citizenship and their right to marry Germans. Chapter 4. Life has meant many different things to many different people, and its meaning continues to change. Life means different things to different people. Thus, we can only define life's meaning in a given time, situation, and person. There is no definite or abstract meaning for life, only a relative, ever-changing one. So don't ask, what is life? But instead, what is life for me? Thus, logotherapy challenges to define the individual's essence of existence. It hands patients the awareness of their own role in defining their own existence. A logotherapist must help the patient to see his life more clearly. Owning to our biological design, we cannot simply exist. We require a meaning, a reason for the random chaos that we have to play a part in daily. A patient can find meaning in one of three ways: doing a deed, experiencing something or someone, developing an attitude toward unavoidable suffering. With the doing of a deed, he can attempt to find meaning in an accomplishment, while in experiencing someone, he seeks meaning whilst experiencing something beautiful, like culture and nature, or by experiencing someone in their truest nature, by loving them. Love, as humans have misconstrued the concept, is really the one way to encounter another person's core and know their true being. Love makes it possible to both see all the person's traits and the potential they possess, and also to help them reach their full potential. In logotherapy, love isn't merely sex, but the primary instinct from which the desired sex is born, and as such, sex is merely one of the many ways of expressing love. Love can be a tool for full disclosure. If you wish to find meaning in your life, first love yourself. The third mode of finding meaning is suffering. First, we must agree that suffering in itself is a form of life and, as such, has its meaning. One can seek meaning from this state, but suffering is not necessary for meaning. Is there an ultimate meaning then? Yes, logotherapy seeks to identify this one super meaning, regardless of the person's religious standpoint. This is done not simply by trying to draw from the patient's belief of a meaning, but rather gives them meaning within their belief system that ultimately explains their lives.
Chapter 5. Logotherapy is a technique in psychotherapy that combats everyday difficulties. We've had brief mentions of logotherapy in contrast to psychotherapy, but here we'll go a little deeper into the details of the technique and what it aims to achieve. Logotherapy has developed a special technique to help individuals face everyday difficulties like fear. It finds a starting point common in neurotic patients, anticipatory anxiety, that makes the sufferer fear something that may happen in the future. This is termed hyperintention and has a similar condition known as hyperattention, which can lead to sickness. A patient pays undue attention to a condition, and its symptoms get inflicted by it. Remember, the fear that something might happen can cause it to happen. The technique, paradoxical intention, helps fix such a condition. It aims to rid one of the anticipatory fears by engaging a patient in thoughts that can cause the intended effects. For example, if you're scared of sweating in public, you should think, I should sweat even more this time. The logic is that you reverse your attitude toward the problem, perceiving it as a challenge. Don't forget, reverse psychology can force the body to negate the anxiety prompts in your head. As logotherapy seeks to combat neurosis, it first approaches it in relation to the age of the sufferers. For most, a neurosis is a form of nihilism, the belief that man is nothing but the result of biological, psychological, and sociological conditions, or the product of heredity and environment. This feeling of nothingness isn't any different from the existential vacuum from earlier. Logotherapy states with certainty that man indeed is nothing but a finite being that isn't just a product of an environment, but the one in charge of what the environment makes of him. Chapter 6. Optimism helps us make sense of the senseless sufferings. Man can always determine his nature in the face of any situation because there exists no condition that can completely rid him of freedom. Thus, even in a neurotic state, the patient has a residue of freedom to decide to be cured or stay in this condition. Keep in mind, our thoughts reflected in our bodily reactions profoundly influence us. We all have the power to choose our responses, even in the face of extreme difficulties. A person can seek refuge in love or a higher appreciation for the life he once had before the suffering. The author believes that one possesses pan-determinism. No matter what, one can rise to challenge the situation and not be trodden down by it. This approach to life is known as tragic optimism, believing that there is some good in seemingly hopeless situations. In logotherapy, tragic optimism seeks to turn suffering into a human achievement, use guilt to better oneself, draw incentive from life's transitory nature. The state can't be forced, hyperintention, since we need a reason to feel emotions. Don't forget, tragic optimism is the search for meaning during hard times, and it can lead to a positive outcome and create a deeper sense of purpose in people. One can learn to be tragically optimistic if one can tell oneself to find the greater meaning in one's suffering, not give up, or turn to immediate pleasure, drugs, sex, and even crime. The logotherapist must help a patient find their remaining part and reinvigorate it, replacing the void that eats away the soul.
Conclusion. Daily, we are confronted with unpleasant moments in our lives, or for some, like the prisoners of Auschwitz, a life of suffering. How we react to these situations is entirely up to us. A situation, no matter how dire, cannot change who you are, love, and will be. You have to seek the meaning of this life for you and make peace with your now. Envision a future for yourself beyond the suffering. A life devoid of meaning or a desire for a future will soon burn out. The inmates of concentration camps were subjected to the worst conditions possible. Some made it out with their souls and minds intact. They remained good people because instead of letting the situation define their lives, they sought one and posed answers to the questions life gave them. It's clear that we cannot exist without a meaning and will spend our lives searching for it. It is important that we don't get trapped in the cycle of distress that is associated with the existential crisis we find ourselves facing. The trick is to realize that there is no fixed meaning to life. You must create this meaning for yourself. You are the captain of your ship. Try this. In today's society, the crisis with an existential vacuum is eating deeper daily. If you find yourself feeling meaningless or you're stuck in a job that presents you with zero meaning or fulfillment, it is your responsibility to design your own happiness. You can seek the help of experts to guide you to achieve a richer, fuller life with meaning.